Okay, everybody, so here's how we're going to start this. We have a basic white sheet of paper here. I'm drawing on moleskin, and I'm using my second favorite pencil. This is the Tombow 4B. So my absolute favorite is the Faber-Castell 4Bs. But really, folks, anything that you want to use to give you some good results, go ahead and use it, even if a pen is what you prefer. But anyway, let's get into it. So the first mistake is the jaw that can't close. Let me give you an example. Let's do a side view of a creature jaw. Okay, so I'm going to do the head. All right, now let's say this one's pretty crazy looking. Okay, big jaw right here, maybe like an overhang, maybe a throat in the back, all of a sudden a really thick neck. Maybe it comes around, kind of looks like a horse, doesn't it? All right, now when we're looking at this, we're immediately thinking over here in the front, okay, it could be a beak, or it could have teeth, or whatever you want it to have. But what happens is we start to draw shapes for teeth that can't clamp together. So if I draw this first sharp tooth up here, if it clamps downward, where's the space on the bottom jaw to hold that? Okay, so just look at it for a minute. We have this flat part right here that we drew. This one was kind of scribbled on, so why don't we just make the jaw pretty thick? There's a pronounced chin right there. It's a pretty crazy looking head. Okay, we got something like that. Now, there needs to be some kind of space down here in order for that incisor to come down. I can also put teeth around it, behind it, or in front. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it in front, and it'll be roughly the same size. So let's say that the mouth only has those two teeth, coupled by the top and then the bottom part of the jaw. Okay, the maxilla is pretty small, big pronounced chin right here, probably turns into a beak, who knows? All right, now, if I want to make this believable, maybe there's an overbite, maybe it goes over the lip. Okay, so what you need to think about is how the jaw hinges too. Okay, when it hinges shut, the shape of the bottom jaw should fit the top jaw so that they clamp together evenly. Does it always have to happen like that? No, it doesn't. Listen, I draw demons a lot, and some of those mouths are absolutely insane. You do have some creative freedom in certain mouths that you draw, and you don't have to be perfect with them. But for the sake of making everything visible and believable, we're going to try to make this as anatomically accurate as possible. Look at this hump right here. Look at this divot right here. So if the top jaw clamps down, it will fit in that groove. Well, you know what we could do? We can probably put another set of teeth right there, maybe two. Wouldn't that be kind of cool? So like if we go down here and we try to draw that same mouth, let's draw the same mouth closed. Okay, so let's say that we have, this is going to be challenging, bottom. Okay, there's the bottom jaw right there. We have the top incisor. Okay, and then all of a sudden it comes up, and then we have the two sharp teeth right there. Yeah, that works. Okay, and then the head goes straight back. And then, of course, this part of the jaw, it's kind of like a little mountaintop. So it goes up, down, and then slightly off at an angle. So we go up, down, and then slightly off at an angle. And then we want to follow this as best we can. So after this incisor, or the bottom tooth, make sure that the jaw comes in. And now we have a big, thick jaw. This is always a good 1-2 combo if you want to make sure that your mouths actually shut properly. And this is a big mistake that a lot of beginner artists have. Now, listen, just because that you might be looking back at your old creature sketches and going, oh, crap, I suck at all of them. All of the mouths are terrible. You didn't fail at anything, okay? This is a learning curve. We all have to do it. You know what, guys? Look, I've been drawing a long time. I still do this. I still have to catch myself because a lot of the creatures that I design for my personal projects and for games, somebody has to model that. And if the modeling is not done correctly, it's not going to work. I'll give you an example. So many of you may know the game Death Ground, which is, like a horror dinosaur hunting game. Okay, well, I had to design the Allosaurus, the T-Rex, Compsognathus, and the Utah Raptor, all meat eaters. Okay, so I had to design the teeth to make sure that they were modeled correctly. All right, it's easy to put a row of teeth in there and hope for the best, right? So this is let's recap for the mouth problem, okay, and the teeth, and make sure that it hinges shut. The shape of the jaws and where the teeth are located. Now, let's say that you have something even more complicated when it comes to a lot of different types of teeth. These are relatively the same. They're kind of all the same size, and they're all pointed the same way. What if you have something that looks like this? All right, so let's say you have like a worm creature, okay, and you have a bunch of teeth coming out like that, and then maybe two huge fangs in the front. I'm just making this up as I go. All right, and then maybe like a big tooth right there and a smaller one there. And let's see what else we can do. Maybe a huge one right there. Oh boy. So how are we gonna make sure that hinges shut? Okay, especially if this is like a really, really strange rounded beast. Okay, oh, let's do this. Let's make it even more complicated. 3 teeth in the front, right here at the top. Okay, these are some things to think about. Now, one thing that I like to do is once you get the perspective in there, so look at the tips of each tooth. Okay, some of these don't have to be perfectly symmetrical. I'm always liking the asymmetry of creature design, okay? Because it's nature. It doesn't have to be perfectly symmetrical, not all the time. All right, so the perspective, I don't want to go back down too much at an angle, just because the way that we're viewing this mouth open is more of an eye level. So everything's going to be pretty even once we get over on this side. All right, now I'm just going to draw the gum line only without teeth, nothing. All right. Okay, folks, here's how we do it. Go to the tips and imagine by drawing a very light line at a slight arc going down. Can you see that? So everybody do that with me right now. Go down at an arc. Don't go straight down. Go at an arc, because the jaw is going to be hinged back here. So that means that when this bottom jaw opens, it's actually going to show the inside of the bottom of the jaw. I'll explain that as we draw it. Second arc. Okay, third right here. Okay, now we're going to get technical, everybody, so bear with me here. Look at the space in between these two, and then at the end right here. So if the arc of that big fat tooth is ending up right here where the bottom jaw would be. Okay, so before we go any further, if you've gone this far, just take a step back, pay attention to what I'm about to do, and then pick your pencils back up. Look at the end of this mouth. There's an abrupt, almost 90-degree change. We're going to put the membrane in here. Okay, now pretend the jaw comes back. Now, if we want this jaw to be able to shut, okay, maybe it can clamp together right there. We're going to open it, and this is the bottom. It's kind of like a teardrop shape. Why? Because the top. We want to make sure that this thing can clamp shut and close on that. Okay, but in order to do that, we have to make sure that the teeth have space on the bottom and the top to do it. All right, so look, there is where the point of that big fat tooth is going to go. There can't be another sharp tooth existing right there, because you can't have a tip touching a tip. It's not going to work like that. It's going to be painful, and that's not how evolution works. Go to the right of it slightly, follow that arc down, and guess what? That's where we can put a tooth. So that when those two shut, that will come in between those two. I know it's kind of tedious, but if you want to get technical, I love getting technical, obviously, because I don't shut up and I love drawing. So I like to get technical and figure out where those hinge together. Now, here's where the fun part happens. We have a huge fang right here. Once that comes down at that arc, this needs to be the room for the fang. So all the space needs to be open. But there's prime real estate to have an awesome, huge fang coming up, almost like an overbite or an underbite. Okay, so we need to take care of this space, follow that arc in between, and guess what? Let's have a really cool mouth or tooth right there. There we go. Because essentially, if those shut, this is what it would look like. The top fang followed by the big bottom jaw one. And then we have, let's see, the bottom jaw. And then we have the fat tooth. Okay, that's almost right here. And then we have the fat tooth coming up there. Okay, I put a little bit more space in between there, so it might not shut all the way up. That little gap might not fit the fatness of that tooth right there. Okay, and then we can keep going. So this little one right here might be kind of like a spare molar, or doesn't really look like a molar. Maybe it's a grinder. Okay, and then we'll just kind of play with some shapes around there. And that's how you're going to work on the different sections. Now, here's something that we normally don't think about. The teeth curved in. So if this is hinging, we're going to have space down here to cover that so that it goes over the mouth. So maybe the bottom jaw is slightly shorter. It's kind of like an overbite. So that, here, let me show you an example. Okay, follow my arrow. Let's look at this from side view. Okay, there's the mouth. There's those three big, huge teeth in the front. So if we look at it from side view, they're already curved inwards, like that. So maybe, let's ignore the rest of the mouth over here, and let's just pretend like, oh, it's almost shutting. So maybe the bottom jaw has to be a little shorter, so it can cover it. You see how it goes past the jaw? It's not going to bite its own lip. All right. And then this is how you check. Let me just put those in there. Okay. And this is how you check all of the different boxes when it comes to making sure that mouths can hinge together. Okay. Now, a lot of times we just want to draw cool crap, right? We just want to draw cool stuff. Look, unless you're modeling the thing, if it's just somebody observing artwork, they just want to see a cool creature, a mouth full of sharp teeth and fangs and all that stuff, it's going to look awesome. There's no reason to get too technical, but this is just so you can practice believability and using real world reference. Study the bones of meat eaters, plant eaters, pretty much all animals with teeth. All right, let's move on to mistake number 2. Oh boy, I am so guilty of this. Okay. Aggression by default. So let's just put that in here real quick. Aggression by default. What does that mean? It means that every creature we design is a predator. Drawing scary things is typically more fun than drawing non-scary things. If you were given a choice between a plant eater and something that can rip your face off, what do you think you're going to want to draw? Unless you don't like horror movies or don't like scary things in general, you're probably going to pick the predator. So let's just jump into that real quick. We got fangs, claws. I'll write all this stuff down, okay? Spikes. Let's see, we have, oh yes, the angry brow. Okay. It could make your designs look predictable. Now, aside from all the scary things that I draw, I also draw birds, mammals, and maybe even things that don't even have a mouth. Okay, you need to be less reliant on scary things and more, or study nature so that you can break the rules later on. All right. Let me give you an example. Scary things, okay, tend to be more fun to do. Why? It's because we as human beings are naturally aggressive. We are not naturally passive. All right. Now, when it comes to aggression, I mean, that's why we start wars. That's why we have thoughts of being angry and wanting to beat people at race. We're competitive and who knows what else. Okay. So when it comes to drawing creatures, we kind of want to project that into it. Okay. So when we draw scary things, like this alien being right here, we got this big gaping mouth. All right. Who knows what's going to happen, right? All we care about is just a giant jaw with teeth, and maybe there's a weird set of eyes on the bottom part of the jaw. Like, who knows what's going on? We just know that it's an alien entity and it's aggressive, and we don't want to go near it. Okay? So if you were to ask me, Bobby, is this more fun for you to draw? It's like, heck yeah, it is. Okay. But I equally love to draw herbivores too. And, in order to do that, you have to study herbivores. You have to study, elk and deer, moose, the omnivores too. You got bears, okay, wolves, and then of course dinosaurs. Okay, you got the Edmontosaurus, you have the Protoceratops, you have all of those ancient mammals and dinosaurs that were thought to be plant eaters too, like the hadrosaurs, the Parasaurolophus. I used to call it Parasaurolophus when I was a kid. So however you want to pronounce it. All right. So once we have that big, scary, unpredictable beast from 30,000 fathoms below, okay, now how would we make the non-threatening version of that? Okay. Well, here's how we do it. We're going to go down here. We're going to try to mimic that same head, but instead of a crazy gaping mouth, okay, we're going to put a very subtle eye on the side, followed by eyebrow. We have the eyelids. Okay, see this protruding cheek right here? We're going to keep that. We're going to give it some ears because the herbivores, or this herbivore, probably needs to hear predators coming. Okay, now what's aggressive over here? We got these exoskeleton shapes, sharp angles coming down and up and down and up. We're going to eliminate those. We got this jaw coming down. Cool. Maybe I'll just draw this mouth open. Okay. All right, so when we look at the mouth down here, we can clearly see that we could put sharp teeth in there, but we're going to keep everything kind of studded. Okay, so these are going to be blocky teeth, and the bigger ones in the back are going to be molars. And we want to make sure that even if the bottom jaw is rounded like this, or, not as sharp and angular at the bottom, we want to make sure that we mimic that. Okay, and then we'll put in a nose, and instantly this feels more mammalian. It almost feels like a bat. Okay, and then we're just going to puff out some of the jaw. Now, for the eye, I'm going to put a pupil in there. Now it kind of looks like a pig. Okay, so once we put those shapes in there, kind of put some fur in there, it looks less deadly and more just like a curious pig-like mammal. And we'll put no sharpness at all. So just the teeth, right like this. And then this little bit back here, I'm just going to put some clumps of fur down there by the jaw. Okay, and we're going to take away any bit that may seem aggressive. Okay, now here's the thing. We don't want the brow to be furrowed. Okay, so we don't want to go down at an angle. We're just going to keep everything rounded and more innocent. So if you look at nature, you're going to notice that with a non-aggressive animal, even the aggressive ones, I mean, you got tigers and wolves and everything. A lot of the big cats do have rather sharper looking eyes, more determined, more fierce. Now I'm just adding specks of hair around the face. This is very quick. We're not spending too much time making sure every single little stroke is good. No. When we want to take away the aggressiveness, we take away lips. Or I'm sorry, if we want to make it aggressive, we take away the lips. And if we want to make it look and seem more natural, we put a thickness to the edge of the mouth. Right there. Okay, so we turned this grotesque thing into this semi-cute bat pig. Okay, what would you name that? I have no idea. Okay, so third problem. Well, first of all, we're going to put a little arrow down here. Okay, third problem. We have the copy-paste limbs. So we're going to put copy-paste limbs. So what is that? All four legs look identical. So what happens is, beginners like drawing every leg with the same angle, same thickness, same length. And then in turn, we ignore foreshortening and how limbs change based on the distance from the viewer. This isn't the symmetry trap like I've talked before. It's a perspective failure. The back leg is a photocopy of the front leg. So I'm going to demonstrate how to fix that. Now, let's look at the problem first. So let's say you have a little body right here. Okay, I'm just going to draw the outline, and I'm not going to put in any details at all. Okay, so let's say it's a quadruped. Okay, now instead of making sure that there's distance in between the legs and making sure that, there's foreshortening for the far limbs based on the shorter limbs in the front, we're going to do this. We're going to put one straight leg, and then the back leg is one straight leg. We're going to go to the back here. We're going to do the same thickness, and then we're going to do the same thickness for this one. So what happens is they all look identical, okay? And there's no foreshortening, there's no kneecaps, there's no hamstrings, ankles, anything. So we need to fix that. And yes, a lot of it has to deal with looking at anatomy, but also we need to think about how a quadruped would actually move forward and backward. All right, so let's do the same shape. All right, draw along with me too. This is always going to help if you draw along with me. Okay, so we'll put that same strange looking bear type creature in here. We'll start with the chest. Now here's how we can do it. Now let's say that here's the scapula right here. There's the deltoid muscle. Okay, there's the elbow. It's coming down right here. There's the front foot right there. Okay. Now there's no ankles in the front feet. All right, that's a little nugget of information that I also want to mention. A lot of beginners will draw quadrupeds with the front limbs having an ankle. They don't. There's only ankles in the back. Okay, so let's draw that ground plane right here. Now this straight line that I'm drawing across with the ground, that we're not viewing the animal from straight side view. Okay, this is just to let me know where the ground actually is. So we can go thicker and move up, just to show that it's moving into the distance going this way and not straight. All right, so this one, let's put one leg forward as if the creature is searching for something or just walking, like this. Okay, so we got maybe a cool little ear right here, strange shape on the head. Maybe it's like an extrasensory organ. And we'll put the front eyes right here. Just give it some love in the design phase. Okay, there's some fur hanging down. All right, now we're going to continue with the belly. And then if you study, the walk cycles for quadrupeds, it's always good to know, like what foot comes out and what foot goes back. Yes, we're going to do this. Now, when we're doing, see, there's the ankles down there. We'll put some ankles in. Okay, so now the back legs themselves are thicker because of the thighs and the muscles needed to propel the creature forward. In the front here, okay, the reason the deltoid muscle is so powerful is because this is the muscle that it pulls the body back so that the momentum can carry it forward. Okay, and these are, I mean, for a predator, okay, these would be the attack limbs right there. This is the weight-bearing limb right there. There we go. Give it a little bit more of a tail there. See how loose I'm being with everything. So you want to make sure you study walk cycles because it really, really helps. Dogs, cats, horses, deer, anything that you can imagine there. Okay, so now it looks more in motion and doesn't look as constipated because you can see the legs going straight down like tree trunks. You don't want copy and paste limbs. All right, especially if you look at the tops of the shoulder and the hip, you don't want to ever round that off. I'm talking about physically putting a line in there because then it just looks like you took two pieces of leg toys or toy legs and just kind of clamped them into the body. You want to stay clear of that. Put some shading down here. And now we have a much more realistic looking walk cycle. And this creature looks like it can live and breathe and move around on its own. Okay, and we got it from this fella right here. All right. So hopefully that helps you. This is something that is often overlooked in a lot of creature designs. So it takes a little bit of practice, but you will get this. Okay, everyone. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is what I like to call the no rest areas. So I'm jumping back to an older sketch that I did with a ballpoint pen, showing you the concentration area of where the details would go versus having rest areas for the eye. To put this simply, this is about contrast between detail-dense zones and quiet zones. Okay, so beginners cover every inch in scales, wrinkles, spikes, texture. And the problem with that is that our eyes have nowhere to land. Okay, so the reason that I left this area open is so that we can concentrate on the head. It's no different than an environment concept artist making sure that there's a focal point for the environment and everything else is left in less detail. Notice how I didn't put a lot of detail on the pincers coming out, left the white of the paper for there, but around it in the skin, I put the wrinkles and the shading and I put the mandible spikes and teeth and shadows, everything that you can imagine. All right, so that's how I want you to think about your focal points and about the rest areas that you could give your creature. All right, so let's jump back into what we were doing earlier for the lesson. So let's say we go back to the original jaw and we want to put some details on that one. All right, so where do we start? Well, first of all, what do we want to focus on first? Probably the mouth gap and the teeth involved, because the teeth themselves are probably going to be the coolest part of the entire thing. So I'm just going to start putting in some gums and maybe some smaller little indications of teeth, what I like to call grinders. Okay, and then especially down here where there's going to be a little membrane, like a little gap in the bite. And then we're going to slowly start to piece together the details in just the mouth slit. Okay, just the gum area. Now, the cool thing is, even if I put a layer of shading moving across here. So let's keep the pencil strokes together. Sorry, I realized my pencil was shaking the desk too much. Okay, so we're just going to put some shading going all the way up to the tip. Same direction. All the way up like this. So we're going to start our foundation. Then we're going to go across at pass number 2. Now, why am I doing this? Because when you lay down that first layer of shading, it's going to take care of any of the shadows and any of the values in between the details that you are inevitably going to put in there. Pass number 3. Okay, and let's do pass number 4. Now watch this. I don't want you to have any fear of shading him inside that mouth. It doesn't have to be white. Okay, we're going to put a bunch of stuff in there. Okay. Probably hear a lot of motorcycles happening in the background. All right, Looks kind of messy. Doesn't matter, because our concentration point is going to be in this mouth. Okay, the next up, I like to put little shadows in to indicate foreshortening in distance, where the teeth are on the other side of that mouth if it's opening. So that's what I'm concentrating on now. So I put those two little incisors in there. And then here, maybe the inside of this strange beak. You know what I'm thinking of doing? What if I just put the beak in like this? That's so strange. And it just kind of clamps down in that direction. There we go. This is why details are so much fun. I can focus on this and not have to worry about filling everything in. All right, now some things to pay attention to. Tooth roots, making sure that the jaw is thick enough to hold those teeth in there. Looks like this root is going to have to be curved. If I start that beak right there, this has to be the fleshy part. So I'm just going to indicate with some shadows where that tooth root can show through the thickness of that jaw right there. Okay, there we go. Now inside the mouth here, I'm actually going to make a little darker. So that's going to be dark. And then I'm going to shade some of the gums. So the gums are going to be medium or medium value. The skin on the outside is going to be the lightest. And the shadow inside the mouth is going to be the darkest. So that way we have a 1, 2, 3 punch. And then I'm going to add in some details right here. I'm going to need to shade that first. Okay, and I already have a little hump drawn. So I'm just going to make that the nose. Then I don't have to worry about it. Notice how I didn't outline it. All I did was just shade it, and it created a nice little outline. I'm going to get darker towards the tip, and I'm going to move lighter as I move back. Draws attention to the finished end that I want to convey. Okay, put some shadow underneath that front beak. And then right inside here where the nose is, I already shaded it. I'm just going to put some small little wrinkles, imperfections in the skin, and just some smaller details that way. As far as the eyeball goes, I think what I'm going to do is put the bottom eyelid, top one, and we'll just leave it at that. There we go. He's not angry. He's not sad. He's just kind of there. Okay, just kind of chilling. Okay, and then put some more shading in here. Now notice how all that detail's coming together right up here in the front, which is good. And then I can put some shadows in and some wrinkles to show, hey, there's muscle underneath there. Maybe, just maybe, this creature can emote. Who knows? Just darken that up a little bit. Probably a larger pupil than most mammals on Earth. And I'll just kind of play with this a little bit, maybe put some ears in there. Okay, there we go. So this is how I want you to approach the details. Give a reason for the area that you're putting details in. What do you want the person to focus on? All right, and I think that'll really help. So hopefully these beginner mistakes helped you a lot. Comment below if you're working on a creature right now and you can't quite figure out what's wrong with it. So hopefully, the hinging of the jaw, sketch, copy paste limbs, aggression by default, all of this hits home, but in a good way. All right. Thanks again, everybody. You've been awesome. Till next time. Peace. Okay, everybody. Today I'm going to show you how I start this gigantic worm creature from scratch. So we're going to go over the 3 different silhouettes that I used, and we're going to be discussing 4 major problems that beginner artists have, and that is confusing or weak silhouette, anatomy that doesn't support the design, shading that flattens the form, and texture applied without purpose. Okay, get your pens and pencils ready, get your sketchbooks ready, get your caffeine ready, sit up straight, because we got a good lesson today. All right, let's jump in. So when we get started in creature design, the driving force is going to be your silhouettes, your thumbnail sketches. So what I'm going to do for this particular lesson today is do 3 different thumbnail sketches. These are going to be loose, and these don't have to be fancy, anybody. Now, when you do these thumbnails, allow your hand to move freely across the page. Explore the shapes. You don't have to know exact anatomy or anything. You know, if you see a bug that you like in a photograph, combine different bugs. You know, that's one of the most fun things about creature design, is that you can combine animals. So one method that I like to give students is take 3 animals that you know would not exist in the same biome. All right, take a desert dwelling animal, and then all of a sudden take something from the jungle, and then take something from the sea. And when you combine those, it could be all kinds of different combinations. Okay, so let me write this down for you guys real quick. So you have your primary, secondary, and tertiary. Tertiary being the smallest. Primary is the biggest influence in the body, and then you have the animal that you would choose for the secondary influence, and then the tertiary. This feels good to go back to these lessons. I haven't done them for a while in my my channel here, but you pick the main silhouette. Okay, so like let's say a buffalo. Okay, and then you do a rabbit, and then all of a sudden for the tertiary you pick an arapaima. Okay, arapaima fish. So then you would find the combination of like what you would invent using the different animals. Okay, but anyway, let's go back to our little worm creature here. Now remember, this is a thumbnail, so we're not spending a lot of time on this. We're just getting a basic silhouette. So that is a perfect segue in talking about today's lesson. Mistake number 1, confusing or weak silhouette. So when we sketch creatures and we're trying to make something just look awesome, the silhouette of it, or the outer edge, like the shape that we see first before the details, that is going to make or break whether or not the creature is readable. If it looks a little off, you know, there needs to be a clear read from a distance. And also the silhouette, you need to avoid it being overly complex and overly symmetrical in outlines. All right, so when we're doing these silhouettes, you have to think about, do the shapes blend together? That's the big thing, everybody. Are the shapes blending together? Or, you know, are you trying to make these shapes look cool and then they end up, it's like you're putting a cat head on an elephant body. It's just not going to work. You know, that happens sometimes. I mean, heck, I still do it. And I have to catch myself from designing just weird, non-anatomically correct creatures. Okay, this one is just nuts because it kind of looked like a slug at first, and now it's just looks like an overweight worm. Don't know. This one up here kind of looks like a hellgrammite. You don't know what a hellgrammite is? Look it up. It's the larva stage before it turns into a Dobson fly. I think they're amazing. And I talk about them a lot in my mentorships too for folks that want to do creature design. Just nature is just really, really awesome and terrifying at the same time. Okay, I don't want to obsess about this one, but despite this one having cool looking pincers, I don't know what it is about that, but it kind of reminds me of the Blob, the creature, and the Faculty. If you've seen the Faculty, you know, like early 2000s, Elijah Wood, like all the old schoolers. Let's move on. Let's do a third one. So I'm not going to be satisfied. I never even told you guys what I'm drawing today for the lesson. We're doing worms.
We're doing worms, just disgusting, gross worms. And this is going to be so much fun. Another mistake that I like to point out as we have ourselves a little adventure with this sketch is anatomy that doesn't support the design. So this is a big thing to really study and to really make sure that you guys are correcting if you find yourself in this trap. Have you ever sketched a creature and instead of knowing the anatomy or knowing what you want to do with it, you just decorate it? And I've gone over this in my previous lessons too, where you decorate instead of showing evolution. Anatomy that doesn't support the design. Once we get out of this thumbnail stage and we actually work on a final, that's when we're really going to get into the four main problems that we face in creature design. Okay, remember, these are just quick silhouettes. Look at the legs coming out of there. That is gross. I wonder what kind of legs those actually should be. You know, like if this thing were to walk around, it could be like a spine right here. I've never really seen a worm with a fin on it. That would be kind of cool. Like an aquatic worm that lives on land and water. Oh man, now we got something from here. Outside of the creature. I don't know what the feet look like per se, but I'm really intrigued by this one. And I can already tell that out of these three, I mean, that was a good warm-up. This one was kind of meh, but this one, I think I found it. Which was the goal, right? You know, we're doing these thumbnail sketches, and we hope to land on the one that we're excited about the most. Hey, that actually reminds me. So if you guys are drawing and you don't get excited, you know, let's say you're on thumbnail number 9, 10, 20, and you still are just looking at them going, these suck. It's okay. It's okay. Everybody's journey to have a good design is different. You don't have to have the perfect design your first go around in the first round of thumbnail sketches. That's ridiculous. Like sometimes, yes, we hit a home run and we all wish that happens every time, but it's not. It's not going to happen. All right. I've worked in games before where, you know, we would be designing an alien creature that had to live in a desert biome. Okay. And I'm looking at reference. And I'm just like, is it going to look like a bearded dragon? Is it going to look like a meerkat? Like, I don't know what is going on. And 15 thumbnails later, and we still haven't found it. And I would go even further than that and say, we did find it. And I did a rendering and everything was fleshed out. And then all of a sudden the art director was like, nope, let's keep going. So that's the part of the job people don't realize is you know, you have to take your emotion out of it. You can't become too emotionally invested in your designs. It's hard. I know everybody. It's so hard, especially when you have that one piece in your portfolio you kind of know sucks and it's like 8 years old, but you don't want to get rid of it because you just are emotionally attached to it and you know it's a terrible, awful piece. Yeah, take it out. That's for like a portfolio review kind of video. We'll talk about that at a later time. Oh man, look at this dirty thing. Okay, well, it's not complete till we number them. You don't have to number them. I like to number them just for my own sanity, and also if we want to pick some designs out or aspects from different ones later, then we can do that. You know, maybe I'll give this one a chance, but I don't see anything remotely striking about that. I mean, I'll give it some credit though. The front is interesting. It's not like your typical worm. And now that I'm going through this, you know, this is why I have to give all of my thumbnails a chance, and all of you guys give your thumbnails a chance too. You're not always going to see something pretty at first, okay? You have to imagine that every thumbnail that you do is a diamond in the rough, okay? So if it's really hideous at first, it just looks like a hairball and you don't really know what's happening, that's okay, because you can always come back to it. These porcupine quills coming off the back here. Didn't expect that. There we go. This is why I like pen. Pen is not my favorite. Obviously, pencils are. But ballpoint pens are so much fun because every single line never gets a flat spot on the graphite. And therefore, the lines always stay crisp. You just have to be confident enough to apply those lines. That's all. Okay, there's the bottom. Okay. I'll give number 2 a chance here. And after this stage, I'm going to show you guys how to evaluate this. And then over here, we're going to do a detailed worm. And it's going to be gross. And you guys are going to help me. Speaking of help, check the links in the description below for our Creature Design Workshop Discord. It's free to join the Discord, and we have monthly creature design challenges. I'll give a prompt on the first of every month, and you have a full month to come up with something based on the prompt. And if you need help with it, like I was mentioning, you can always ask for feedback. And we also have sketchbook threads. You know, back in the day, there was conceptart.org. Those of you that remember that forum that was online, it's unfortunate what happened to it. But, you know, I try to bring some of that magic back with the creature design. And if you want feedback on your work from industry professionals, from artists that are more experienced than you that might bring some good advice, we encourage that too. And it's also a safe, clean place. We definitely filter out, we take it very seriously. We filter out any nonsense. Okay, any nonsense, any bullying, anything like that is not tolerated, and it is eliminated within an hour if found. Okay, this is absolutely disgusting. It looks like DNA just decided to run amok with this thing, and I'm just going to put a horn on here just because. A worm with a horn. So there we go, folks. A genetic mishap in the evolution of our exotic, chaotic worm. I still like number 3. All right. We are going to move over here, and I'm going to show you how we can build our worm creature based on what we have here. Come on the journey with me. All right, so I've listed over here the 4 main things we're going to talk about today. Confusing or weak silhouette, anatomy that doesn't support the design, shading that flattens the form, and texture applied without purpose. So, where do we start? If we don't want to do all these, where do we start? Well, let's look up here. Confusing or weak silhouette. Now, when we're looking at our 3 thumbnail sketches over here, and you know, I'm going to be choosing number 3. I want to make sure that that silhouette is not weak. So one of the main ways to do it is imagine the creature being in a video game already or a movie. Now, I like that stance that it's in, so I'm going to use that. I'm going to start very, very lightly. And when I do this, I want to make sure that I keep that wispiness of the body. Remember, guys, when you're doing stuff for or with a pen, these lines are down. Keep everything super light. And if you're doing this with a pen, that's okay. If you're doing this with a pen, just be careful that you don't go too dark at first. I often get asked, how do I sketch with a pen and it doesn't bleed? Well, I got a couple answers. 1, quit buying bad pens. Just throw them out. If they're old and that ink has dried at the tip, make sure that you just open your sketchbook. Look what I do here. See these little circles? I just do this. I get everything loosened up inside the pen, and then I draw. It can't get any more straightforward than that. If it still bleeds, you're either pushing too hard, or it's a brand that maybe isn't that good. Okay, I'm using a Bic round stick, and these things are classic. They've been around for decades, and they're great. And you'll get a bad one in the litter at some point, but for the most part, they're great. Confusing or weak silhouette. Have purpose with it. I know that this creature is going to bite, and it's going to bite really hard. So I'm just going to put some pincers in here. Right, like this. Now I definitely want an oval where I believe the head is going to go. I haven't committed to anything, and I'm using this as reference, but I don't have to rely on this to have, all of these lines exact. Okay, it looks like there's double the amount of sharp mandibles inside here. See how light that I'm being, and I'm also trying to outline my creature too. The outline is everything. Whenever I'm drawing worm-like creatures that have some kind of pincer or mandibles that poke out, I want to make sure that these shapes are actually readable and they have a purpose. So inside here on the pincer, it's serrated like a knife edge. So if you study bugs, like stag beetles and any kind of beetle, really, even carpenter ants, you'll see the different serrated edges on all those pincers, and it helps them form, it helps them gnaw on leaves and sticks and whatever else that they can get their mouths onto. But anyway, I want to make sure that the silhouette is going to be readable. So I'm really trying to think about the underlying anatomy and bumps and ridges that look like there's a skull underneath it, some kind of bone structure. Could it be an invertebrate? Maybe. But looking over here, I have some legs coming off, and I have a big fin right there. So I want to make sure that that looks awesome too. There we go. And I'm just going to put in some of those weird those little legs on the side. They're not really like insect legs, but it's almost like I forget what animal it is. Or they're almost like small little arms without fingers. This is why I love pen. This is so much fun because you can get very light with these and also dark immediately. Notice how I have not shaded anything. All I've done was give a nice dark outline to the bottom. Now, why am I doing it for the bottom? It's because, that's shadow, that's the point of contact that it's making for the ground. So I want to make sure that I take that into consideration. This big giant pincer that's coming out of the head here. Notice how I have this big lump inside that head. That's because that the pincer is coming from that head. Okay, so it's growing under there, and I got to make sure that I honor that anatomy. And we'll get into the anatomy in a minute because, number 2 is anatomy that doesn't support the designs. But right now I'm trying to give it a good silhouette. So if I were to look at this creature from 30, 40, 50 feet away, if you're playing it in a video game, can you still see what kind of creature it is? This is why World of Warcraft and StarCraft, Diablo, Doom even, games like that where they have creatures, you can still tell what they are even if you look at them from afar, and symbols, and even from your television set or your computer screen far away. All right, so now that you see how I'm building this, we're going to fast forward a little bit. Well, not fast forward. I want to have a fun little drawing session with you guys. So each lesson that I try to give, we'll put on some relaxing music and you can draw along with me. You can see all the details that I'm putting in here. And later on, we're going to be doing some time lapse as well. All of these tiny little wrinkles that I'm putting in here, I'll go over that, but I just want to make sure that these large shapes on the outside are readable. The center line I'm going to have to put in here. Center line is everything, folks, because if you want your creature to have any kind of a spine, backbone, whatever, or if you just want your creature to have decent symmetry, this is the way to do it. Now I'm going based off this. Now it's probably going to change as I move over here with it, and that's okay. I don't know if I want the fin to come all the way down on the head because this might be open. I don't know what types of teeth or mouth this thing is going to have yet. So I'm just going to do an outline of where I want that fin to go. And I want to make sure it's simple, but yet readable. I just did a wireframe for it. So this is the top crest of the fin, and it's bending around. So very lightly, I'm going to indicate where some ribbing can be within that fin. Look how light that is, everybody. Very light. So light, in fact, that like you zoomed out, you could barely see it, and that's the way it should be. And then once we get something that's decent, then we can start putting in some details. And that's when the fun really starts. All right, there we go. Okay, so if you're doing this with a pencil, sharpen your pencils right now. All right, and I want you to take a step back and enjoy this quiet little drawing session that we're about to do. And I want you to watch as I build the silhouette on the side. So I'll be doing the outline first. I'm not doing a ton of detail. There's going to be no shading whatsoever inside here yet. We'll get into that in a minute because we have to talk about shading that flattens the form, and you don't want that. All right, let's go. So when it comes to creepy crawlies, and we're talking about anatomy that should support the design that you're doing, I want to keep things simple. Now, the legs on the outside, I designed basically to help it move along. That's the only reason why these appendages exist on the side. Now, being a creature designer, you have the liberty of inventing the shapes of them and how they look. Go crazy with them. This creature obviously doesn't exist on Earth, but make it to where it could. And that is, look at all of the worm-like creatures, centipedes even, we have millipedes and ancient like insects and arthropods and everything that has lived on Earth. Look at the fossils and look at how scientists believe that they crawled across the ground. With this particular creature, there are two main sets of anatomical features. We have the fin, and I'm thinking, well, it probably can swim and also use the fin to regulate body temperature. And then two, the legs on the outside. Now, yes, the pincers technically could be three. That's like the main threat that we have here. If you're trying to attack it or you don't want to get bitten, avoid those at all costs. Actually, I think that perspective's off a little bit. There we go. I try to sketch in my perspective lines here. Very lightly, by the way. So if you're doing this with pen or pencil, just sketch some perspective lines across here. Make sure that they go to the correct vanishing point in the distance. Anyway, here we go. All right, so just some things to watch out for. Limbs attached in impossible ways, joints bending incorrectly, and muscles not supporting weight or motion. This thing is ground-based. All right, it's going to be trudging on the ground and crawling. So for the muscles supporting the weight, we at least want to make sure that the legs are spread out to grip the ground on the outside, because the whole belly of this thing is touching the ground. All right, now if it has to swim, it could probably use those tiny little legs to help it move along, but it's more of a land-based creature than anything else. Okay, now, the third thing, we're going to talk about shading that flattens the form, okay? And we can probably talk about shading that flattens the form and texture applied without purpose at the same time. I could spend hours just filling in all these little wrinkles and bumps, which, I would definitely do, because the anatomy is pretty much given to me. It's a slimy surface. There's not a lot going on, but it does have some protections. We're going to do like little bumps and like maybe hard bony shapes coming off here. But you want to make sure that there's purpose to this texture. All right, now this thing, I don't want to put a lot of scales on it, but instead it's going to be a slippery, slimy, amphibious type of texture. Okay, and when it comes to shading, especially with a ballpoint pen, you're going to have to be a little bit slower and more methodical with this. If you're an impatient artist, it's going to backfire immensely. I like to grip the pen at the tip. You want to tilt the pen so that the tip is not straight down. If you put it straight down, it's going to apply all the ink. You want to apply the least amount of ink possible when you shade with the ballpoint pen. It's not like a pencil where you can turn the pencil to the side and it's sharp and you just get like a bigger shaded stroke. No. Not like that with a ballpoint. So you turn it to the side a little bit and you don't press hard, and you do tiny controlled lines going back and forth. Notice how I'm going directly over those little wrinkles that I drew, all right? Because the shading comes before the details. I only put the wrinkles in there to give me a placeholder for them. That's it. Those aren't the final wrinkles or anything else you see in there. Now, I'm going to turn my sketchbook and I'm going to hit this at another angle. I'm not going to press harder. You have to be methodical about this and you really have to concentrate. More so than you would with pencil. There we go. Look at this area right in here. You see how that took care of itself? Just like a pencil. I could easily Go over this 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 passes, 20 passes even, depending on how adventurous I'm feeling, okay? But we're going to be building this up slowly. Now, all these little markings that I'm putting right here, this pincer and the anatomy underneath the skin that the pincer is growing, it's growing from the skeleton or whatever type of cartilage is under there. I have to make sure that that looks rounded and not flat. Well, guess what, guys? What kind of surface is this? Kind of spherical, kind of cylindrical. It gets a core shadow, doesn't it? So we're just going to make sure that I apply a smooth coating of pen. Okay, and I'm going to turn this. Maybe push a little harder to kind of fill in those gaps. I'm still not satisfied. Patience. Take a deep breath. If you find yourself wanting to skip steps, take a deep breath and build this up slowly. You're going to thank yourself. See that ridge right there where it's light on our left and dark on our right. And there's this line going through here, almost like a line. You could take care of that. Go to that line. Here, let me turn the sketchbook up like this. This is how you fix it with pen. At a specific angle, whatever is most comfortable for your hand, you're going to go over the dark and light part right on top of that line. And you're going to go back over it and over it and over it, back and forth, right like this. Don't press hard. You're going to turn your paper and you're going to do the same thing at a different angle. Now, depending on how close the strokes are together, you can fill up the area quicker. So I would say looks like 3 passes it's going to be. So that looks a little better. I'm trying to get an angle that I did not go before. Okay, now we don't have to get rid of that line because technically that's where the core shadow is going to be, but we smoothened it out a little bit. Now for the core shadow, we're going to press a little harder. We have to look at what the shape is doing. Everybody take a step back. If you find yourself following along with me and you have a body part on your creature that is rounded, figure out what the surface is doing before you shade. Because the shading, it's only there to define what you want. And you have to know what shape it is. Since this is rounded and it looks like it's not a perfect cylinder, there's like some lumps in there where there's muscle. That's okay. For the most part, it is rounded. So I'm just going to indicate where that core shadow is on the side. Right, like that. Okay, see how dark that got? That's okay. Because remember the technique that I showed you before where we just go over the dark in the middle part and then we kind of even it out? That's what's going to happen. It's just more controlled this time. So let's take a closer look at this together. So one of the most fun things about sketching with a pen is I love the cross-hatched look that the pen strokes give. It's different than a pencil. It offers that really neat, almost comic book feel. But for this one, I want to make sure that everything is as even as possible. So it's going to take a little bit of methodical maneuvering, I like to call it. And there's going to be some pen strokes in there where it was kind of unexpectedly dark. That's okay. See this area back here where it's pretty dark? Honestly, folks, I'm not even going to touch that anymore. This is when discipline comes in. It's like I'm not going to touch that area because I'm going to end up overworking it. So let's start focusing on areas that need more work. Like, for example, the skin touching the pincer. What's happening right there? Well, I kind of like that sudden abrupt change in texture, just the fold. It's like the skin stops. There's no cuticle because it's not a nail. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put maybe this thing molted at some point. Maybe the pincer itself is very old. Maybe this creature's hundreds of years old and new layers of pincer came through and the old stayed. And over time, we just see more of it. Okay, here's where the fun really starts. See the shaded area that I put here? lightly, I'm going to start putting in some wrinkles on top of the shading. And then that's when the magic happens, because all the shading was taken care of. Now look how cool this is. There's a lot of open space right here, a lot of blank page, just white showing and then some pen. And all of a sudden you have this one little concentrated area with detail. That, my friends, is your first foray into like fixed details. Okay, focusing on specific areas. So to go back and talk about this shaded area right here, you want to find the large forms first. All right, so this creature is basically a giant cylinder. Okay, so running across this body, even through back here in the torso, and then it's wrapping around back here, it's going to have a core shadow across the whole thing. When you think about that coupled with light logic, so we need to establish that light source. We need to figure out where the details are going to be coming from, but also how they hit, how the light hits it. A lot of times beginners won't think about lighting. They'll just start shading randomly. It's kind of like young comic book artists, like aspiring comic book artists, when they'll just start inking shadows in areas where the shadows wouldn't exist. If you're inking something, the area where the ink is placed, like the jet black areas, that's the exact same area that normal shade of like value would happen. So we need to think about that, the light source. And then the details that are sitting on here, the little wrinkles and such, this is really important. I'm going to keep this light at first. This is when you can really start to build up some awesome details for your critter. I like putting little darker lines down here for the shadows, or just a good outline for the creature. Now I'm also going to be putting a cast shadow on the floor or the ground, so the creature won't be floating, which is another one that's I'm probably going to give a bonus lesson on floating creatures. All right, stop making your creatures floating. Give them a ground to walk on. Doesn't matter what it is. It could be grass, mud, dirt, gravel. Doesn't matter. Oh yeah, now my favorite part of any kind of creature design is always the mouth. I love it. I love it. I love it. Sharp teeth. But I want to make sure that the anatomy here is at least doable, okay? Especially in between the teeth. So we got these big mandibles on the side, and each one of those will have its own set of ligaments and tendons. It's kind of like a claw. We want those to point inward so prey can not escape. I was using the example of just nature, the inside of the mouth on the leatherback sea turtle. Google that right now, and then comment below and let me know when you became horrified at looking at that. Definitely don't want to get bit by that. I would rather get bit by an alligator snapping turtle than a leatherback sea turtle. Because when you see those teeth, then you'll realize it. So, one of the coolest ways to be unpredictable and different with your creatures is asymmetry. This is something I've gone over in my previous lessons too. So when we're talking about, texturing, and we're going to be talking about that more in a second, like texturing and how you apply it with purpose. When you put these types of anatomical features in here, like the mouths and everything, you have to think about how this creature bites down. Are you just putting random demonic teeth poking up everywhere? No. I got these two large ones on both sides. Okay, the pincer is there to trap prey. That's why it has pincers. It's going to grab you. And everything in here is going to slowly devour you. It's going to push you into its mouth. All right, so we have these secondary ones that are going to keep you locked in. And then the tiny ones are going to act like a knife, basically. It's going to take you in there. Now, I don't want to have the typical circular worm mouth that we see. It's cool. I love the giant sandworms in Dune. Those rightfully had to have circular mouths. I get it. Just because of the shape of the body and everything. But this one is more like a lizard. And the bottom jaw, it's going to open and close similar to a lizard mouth. There we go. That's kind of fun. And I'm changing up the little directions inside the mouth here. This is why I love using pen, because I can just immediately get dark inside that mouth, but I'm not going to do it yet. I don't want to overcommit. And I also want the eye to rest. So I'm not just going to be putting random anatomical features in, like on the bottom here. See how there's a lot going on right there with the teeth, but all of a sudden it's kind of bare. It's just a chin, basically. That's what I want to do. If I were to put something, maybe tiny little protective hardened scales on the skin, other than that, nothing. And since repetition is one of the principles of design, I'm just going to repeat that design up here too. And I'm just going to make sure that it goes across the body and travels through the back. We want to give the illusion that this particular detail, this anatomical feature, is repeated. Speaking of that, so another way to make your creatures more believable when you're doing this is, finish the design off when you invent something. That is, if you're going to put a tentacle in there, put the tentacle on the other side of the head and then give a reason why that is there. Okay, continue that design aspect across everything. Whatever I design on the heads of these things, typically that type of detail is going to be repeated throughout the body. That's just how nature works. But hey, nature's different on other planets, right? All right, there we go. Up here as the body changes direction, I'm just going to put some shading. I mean, most of the tip it's mostly touching the paper and it's not the ink. There we go. We used to do this fun thing in grade school where we would take the pen and put it all the way to the side and run the tip of the pen across the page really fast for like a minute straight. And then you touch the tip and it's super hot. We were kids back then. We're just figuring out science and everything. And watch, all the kids that are going to watch this are going to be doing that in school. You didn't hear that from me. Okay. Now we are really cooking on these details. This is when things really start to come in play. And hopefully everybody's enjoying this, man. I love having you guys here. I learn a lot about you guys too, and the struggles that you have in school and learning art. And look, I read all comments, every single one. And if I don't get to you, if I don't get to answer back, it's not that I'm ignoring you. I'll try to at least give you a little heart. But I read some of those comments and suggestions on subject matter that I go over. And it's important to me because a lot of that stuff is awesome. And it's stuff that I haven't really thought of covering yet. I try my hardest to cover problems and trials and tribulations that people go through as an artist. Because remember, man, I was a beginner once too, and I know how that feels. Okay, so right here, I'm going to catch myself forgetting a major possible anatomical flaw. And I don't want to forget, and I want you to look at this right now and tell me what you think it's going to be. Okay. That shape, the whole pincer growing out of there, that shape is non-existent over there. So I caught myself. All right, so that means that all these scribbles over here, I'm just going to be drawing over them. It's a fatter head than I thought. So I'm just going to be traveling my pen over here, and it looks like that's going to be sticking out. Yeah, right there. Okay. Now I feel better. So now, whew, that was a close one, folks. We can kind of go back in here and add in that anatomy for the pincer growing up into that head. Okay, that looks much, much better. So what's going to happen is it's going to go up and over, flat head, up and over. And I'm going to put in some values over here. There we go. Okay. I'm not going to pay too much attention right now with, you know, the details on this side. This pincer is going to get most of the love, and that's what I want to do. I'm going to make sure that the shading and the wrinkles and everything look pretty decent in there. And I think I'm going to give some stretched skin to connect those two. Very lightly, I'm going to put in a little valley of shadow. Okay, there we go. And as I'm looking at this, I can't help but feel the need to put just one row of pretty sharp, I guess, spikes going down that. Now, this is a strategic choice. I'm not doing this just because I think it looks cool. This thing needs protection. This whole mandible, whole pincer area, this is just sticking out. It's one of the larger shapes. So in nature, typically the parts that stick out the most are going to require either the thickest skin for protection or the thickest scales or horns. Okay. So I just want to make sure that that is taken care of. I'm just going to put these little darkened spikes right there. And so what do I have to do? I'm going to go to the other side and I'm going to indicate, I'm going to make sure that these spikes are kind of leaning over just due to the shape. Another area I want to focus on is inside here in that mouth. I want to add some thickness to what I feel should be the gums. And then just indicate slightly where the bottom gums are. So there's going to be no fancy tongue, no stinger or anything coming out. Now the head here, this is going to be interesting because I want it to have a strong looking noggin, but also I don't want it to be almost, you know, too bumpy. The fin coming down here needs to stop at some point. This is the center line, so I'm just going to lightly brush in the edge. This is why establishing the center line is good, because that center line runs down right here through the mouth, and it's going to curl back under the body. All right. I think that thing needs a little better of a shape. There we go. Okay. So we have this like thick, fleshy part. It's poking up right there. This is why I like going back over my pen strokes lightly. You can see them appear as I do that. Okay, and then the teeth. Each tooth has a root. So you want to make sure that you show those roots and put in the necessary little shadows around them. Another reason why I like pen is because you can get dark right on the edges of these teeth. There we go. Okay. And wherever they get dark, you can put in some shadow right behind them for the inside of the mouth. We're not going to do that yet. Maybe a little bit right there. But I think for the most part, we're just going to leave it over here on the side. This is going to be in shadow. So's this. Because it's rounded and it's going underneath, it's lit from above. So you have to know what the light sources are doing, or light source, I should say, not sources. That's actually a big problem with artwork. Too many light sources. Pick a light source. How do I know this? Because I did it. I did it a lot. And it took me a while to figure that out. A lot of critiques, a lot of people telling me that my lighting was bad. Then I had to figure out how to fix that. Another thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go to the edge of this pincer, right like that, and I'm just going to darken the tip. Probably longer strokes are needed right down there. I'm never satisfied with how the tip looks on these things, so I'm just going to curl it up and make it look like a grabber pincer. And then I'm just going to stop because I don't really need to do anything else. All right. A lot of details are coming in, folks, and I'm focusing on the head. Notice how I've been on the head for a while. Mainly because the head, if I get the details in the head, it's going to establish a lot of things. It's going to establish the personality, the character, and it's going to actually help dictate the details that are going to happen on the rest of the body. And that's just what happens. So give yourself a focal point and really focus on that. So for me, the selling point for this creature is that head. That's what I want to sell all of you. Not for money, but the idea. I want to sell the idea that the face, if this were going to be in a game or a movie, the face is the first thing you were going to see. It's the last thing a victim is going to see. And also, it's like the coolest part of the creatures most of the time that you're designing. You know, you want a cool looking face, right? You want a cool looking face, and what better to do that with than a disgusting worm with sharp teeth, right? I wouldn't even consider this a worm anymore. I don't know what it would be. Comment below. What would this actually be? You know, this thing is gross. Kind of combination of several animals. I think here we're kind of ready to put in some shading with a pen. I'm just not pressing hard. You can see the hatching happening, which is good. I'm just going to turn this slightly, and I'm going to do more of that. Okay, you can see how the gaps are being filled in. You can still see the crisscrossy, like the fence. I'm going to go a direction number 3, and I'm going to go in between that. There we go, and it took care of that. Now that kind of looks, that's pretty smooth. And I won't do any more. Okay. Get the top of the teeth there. Give it a nice little outline. There we go. Now they're really showing up. They're showing up, and we can clearly tell where the teeth are versus the inside of the mouth that we have not shaded yet. I hope that you all are having so much fun with this. I'm having a blast. I love teaching you guys about this. I have a Patreon, which is, it dives deeper into the anatomy and how I invent it. I show how I invent it, and I show the references that I look at, you know, for games and movies and whenever I want to work with clients. So if you're interested in that, just check the link in the description and also the pinned comment, and you can subscribe. You can even join my Patreon for free. You know, if you decide not to pledge and you just want to join for free, I got stuff in there for free. Freebie stuff and sketches and pictures of the inside of the books that I'm studying. So all kinds of stuff. A lot of fun. Okay, so the side here, here's the interesting thing, everybody. I got a lot of shading right here, right in this area. I don't want to do it over there, okay, because I already shaded that mandible. So the contrast is showing up quite nicely. So maybe the light source is coming at an angle. So I kind of want to put more of the details right in here. We're really going all out on this. You guys can really see me build up these wrinkles. I'm pressing harder in certain areas, releasing the pressure in other areas. Keeping things super light. And I'm still having fun with this. This is the part when adding details is fun because your underlying structure, like the large shape, is already taken care of. Remember that core shadow that we put right there? Okay, that's why we've only focused on this area. This fleshy bit, I mean, check this out. See this kind of guitar pick shape right here? That's a part that comes up over the head. That would actually get a core shadow. Not a big one. You know, I can start shading in some shadows right there. You know, I'll go at a different angle. And then maybe it'll have like a slight little ridge where the shadow is going to run across this, just a little darker than the other areas, because you can have a little valley here where there's wrinkles. And now you could see like another little core shadow happening, and it makes it look rounded. This is one of the things I'm talking about when it comes to shading that flattens the form versus shading that actually makes it look realistic. So look at your sketches right now and ask yourself, is the shading that you're doing just the same across everything, and there's no core shadow, there's no cast shadow on anything? That's what's holding your drawings back. So just make sure that you take care of that. I'm being very picky about this pincer. If that sounds weird, it's just because over the years I've forced myself not to call it a pincher. It's actually not pincher. Which is weird. It's just a strange word. You would think that it's a pincher, like because you pinch. And so do these things, but it's not how you say it. It's so strange. So what I'm doing now is I'm putting in some cool wrinkles and little valleys in the skin to show where the tooth roots may lie underneath all that flesh. Right here on this jaw, the bottom jaw, this is actually going to be in shadow. So as I'm doing this, I'm just going to go straight over the mouth. And then I'm just going to go at another angle. This is going to take some patience because remember, ballpoint pen does not cover the areas the same as a regular pencil. Very light, everybody. We're going to turn this. You may actually have to do this 15 times with the pen until you get what you want. There we go. Okay, I don't want to do any more because it might seem a little too messy. But what I am going to do is I'm just going to indicate each individual root going into the chin. I'm going to darken the edges of the teeth. Very, very tiny serrated edges, man. Scary. Darken the tip of that big one. This is play up on values, just making sure that everything shows up. Yeah, there we go. All right, let's take another look at this, but from farther back.
Okay, so the next part is, as promised, I was going to do a little cast shadow here on the ground. I'm going to show you a good way to do that. So look at all the tips of the hands coming out, or appendages, whatever you want to call them. The shadow that is closest to it. So when the shadow spreads from the body to the tip of that, it's going to be darkest at the tip because the object is closest to the ground. I'm going to call it an object. I'm not even going to call it an arm. So that's when it's going to be the darkest. And then as the object moves away from the ground, the light source comes down and there's more bounce light. So it's going to diffuse a lot of the shadow that's in the middle. All right, so if that sounds confusing, I have to be technical about this so you guys understand it. So the shadow closest to the body, that's going to be the darkest because the object's closer to it and less light is able to penetrate underneath that body and light the surface. So what I'm going to do is since I have a pen, it's going to be a little different. I'm going to do tiny little marks. It's almost as if I'm drawing sideways grass petals or just hair marks coming out from underneath the body. This is going to take a little patience. It's different than a pencil because a pencil, when you sketch with the graphite breaks apart. It's a mineral. So it breaks apart and it covers more space. But with ink, you're at the mercy of just the thickness of the tip, and that's it. And it's pretty much the same line thickness as you move out. So once I have these lines coming out here like this, and all I'm doing is I'm starting dark and I'm just kind of brushing into a lighter stroke as I come off of that. I'm going to keep going, all right, until there seems to be a thickness inside that shadow. It's going to take a couple dozen passes, but it's going to pay off, okay? Trust me on that. And as I go, I'm going to get closer to the body and I'm just going to press a little harder and release the pressure as it moves away from the body. And I'm just going to keep compiling this or piling this until I'm satisfied with how it looks. Now, once I get a lot of those in there, and I could spend 20 minutes on that, and I'm going to go a direction that is perpendicular to it. So I'm just going to run the pen down near the body, and that's it. Not out here, but near the body, because I can afford to get darker near the body, not out here. So you don't want to risk it. And I'm going to brush some pen strokes real close to the body. Now these strokes, they're not going to be perfect. So if you find yourself accidentally putting one dark line across there, don't sweat it, folks. It's okay. All right, so here we go, right here. This is where it can look really realistic. Down here, where that meets the ground, it's going to be a little darker. I'm going to fuzzy it up, which means that I'm just going to run over the tip of that with the pen, And I'm going to fade it off towards the body. See the little gap in between that shadow? It's dark here. It's lighter. It gets darker near the tip. Keep that. Don't go over anything else. You're done. Next thing, you're going to brush this to your left, or my left. I don't know what your creatures look like. We're going to keep going and stop. That's it. Now, underneath here, you could get a little darker just because the body is, going past the first claw here. And then once we keep going, there. We don't have to do anything else, and there's a nice contrast. There's the lighter claw right here, and then there's the shadow. Now, it depends on how picky you are and how realistic you want to make this. If you don't like these pen strokes coming off here where it looks like hair, you can get rid of those. I would advise not to, just because you already established where the shadow is. Okay? There's no need to try to perfect this, because what happens is if you start shading out here where it's supposed to be light, you're adding value out here. You're not supposed to. So you're just going to kind of double up and triple up and quadruple up all of the strokes that you want to put, and then you're going to do something wrong and you're going to try to cover it up. Or worst case scenario, if you're doing it with pencil, you're going to try to erase the shadow and you just screwed everything up because you try to shade on top of the erased area. You already took up part of the coating of the paper. So good luck getting it back. All right, now here, the bottom of the chin, there's going to be some more shadow. I didn't do a good job at defining this pincer right here, so I think what I'll do is put in some more serrated edges and then some shadow right there. Now there's going to be skin attached to the inside of the mandible. You can't see it over here. But we're just going to give the illusion that it's there. And then we're going to do the same thing we did here over here. I'm going to put some markings coming off. Notice how I'm still going horizontal. The direction of this shading is the same as this. If you want to make this feel unified and you don't want to go all over the place in different directions, which it's okay if you do that, like if you want to cross hatch or something, that's fine. But to try to keep everything unified, then this is the good way to do it. Just keep everything directional and like one directional. So let's say you keep doing it. Now I have to be careful here. Look what's happening. See the shading on the inside of the jaw? And now look at the shadow, the cast shadow on the ground. It's going to end up being the same thing. But why don't we do this? Inside that corner, let's say that the whole front of this creature is casting most of the shadow down here. Well, guess what, folks? I can get pretty dark in between the pincer and the jaw. I'm going to have to do it methodically, and I'm not going to obsess. Well, I am going to obsess about it, but I'm not going to, try to spread this out anywhere than I have to. Small little controlled bursts coming out of that corner. Just do this carefully. Now look what's happening. That corner now is establishing good contrast between the jaw, the corner, and the pincer. There's 3 different values happening here. This is what you want. I'm not even going to touch that pincer. That pincer right here maybe gets some small little markings, but the light source is hitting that sucker, and probably most of the light is hitting right here. There is going to be a cast shadow underneath the pincer, and this is where you have to be very careful. I like to do longer wispy marks because it allows me to fill larger areas. And remember, this pincer is pretty much floating. It's above the ground. So I want to make sure that when I use the pen and I put that shadow in, it's going to be layered correctly. See how these longer light strokes are just kind of flowing into the back right here? And it's going straight into this shadow. It doesn't look good though. I have to be careful not to put too many streaks in there. Okay. The next thing to watch for. So since this shadow is pretty close to that pincer, all right, it's not going to be really dark, but it's going to be darker right here. And then maybe as the pincer gets higher up on the body, it gets farther away from the ground. Therefore, the shadow isn't as prominent. See how the tip of the shadow is fading off into this? Stop right there. You're good. You're good. There's no point in doing anything else. In here, we want to cast that shadow too. So I'm going to put a little bit of a shadow on the ground. You're going to see most of it right in here. This is kind of a confusing area. I didn't do a good job on this area right here. So I'm just going to edge off what I think it would be. It's almost like this pincer is closer to the mouth than this one. So this one's like opening up. But that's no real excuse. So I just kind of messed up there. See, I have to own my mistakes in this, my perspective mistakes. If you find yourself trying to give excuses for your drawings, that's why you're not getting any better. So I have to check myself sometimes. If I screw up, like I screw up. But if you screw up and you tell yourself, oh, that's just the way it is, or that's just the style that I draw. It's like, no, that's not the style. That's the wrong anatomy or wrong perspective. All right, there we go. I'm not even going to touch this area in here because I don't want to screw up the edge here. I kind of like that. And then what I can do is down here underneath the body, just very carefully put in some shadow of each leg going to it, to the body, that is. Just do it very lightly, everybody. There we go. Okay. And we don't really need to go any more into detail about this shadow. I mean, I could probably spend another 20 minutes on the shadow portion down here, but there's no point because I don't care nearly as much about this part of the body as I do about this. The finishing touch is going to be the inside of that mouth. I need to figure out what is going on with the inside of that mouth. But you can see here, I'm still laying horizontal lines. And I'm going to, put some different directions in here, depending on how long I need the strokes to be. But for the most part, it's going to stay that way. Yeah, that shadow's looking pretty decent. And of course, this can be lit in here. It could be rather a dark corner. This outer pincer is going to be darker than those claws in the background. It's all about layering, everyone. All about layering. And I'll probably have to darken these. There we go. Okay, that's looking a little bit more grounded. So another really cool trick is that when you put a shadow in places that are touching the ground, remember what I said about fuzzying it up? Go on the outside of the pincer, like the tip, and fuzzy that up too. Because it looks like the light and the shadow and everything are dispersed around it, therefore giving the illusion of an actual ground, like the creature's occupying real space. That's what you ultimately want. I probably could put in some shadow in there. I don't want to do too much because that's not really the focal point, but that's an interesting part of the body. Yeah, I just wanted to show that off just a little bit more. Oh, this is so much fun. I hope you guys are having fun too. Hopefully you're learning something about the shading also, and these. Confusing or weak silhouette, anatomy that doesn't support the design, shading the flattened forms, and then texture applied without purpose. So hopefully you're avoiding these. Okay, so over here, I can actually get darker with that leg and darker with that leg. Now, how did I know to come up with that solution? Because the background of the body is really light. So you can get darker with anything laying in front of it, and it creates immediate contrast. It's all about contrast, everyone. That's all it is. It's just knowing when to get darker, when to get lighter, and when to figure out like things that are occupying space. There we go. Okay, now we are talking. Right there. So, as promised, we are jumping into the mouth. Now, how is this going to happen? Well, there's a lot of darkness happening around the teeth and around the gums. And guess what, everybody? It's kind of taken care of already. I'm not going to go in there and add in a black hole for a throat. The throat's back here somewhere. It's not even in there. The hole is going this way. So what I could do is I could just cover up the corners with some very light shading and then go into the middle of the mouth and then go back here, do the same thing. Okay, and then maybe hint at just some random lines inside there, just very light, just to give an indication that there's structure. That's it. That's it. I don't really need to do much else. In the corner here, I could go dark. Sorry about that. Yes, I could go dark in the corner. But look at these teeth down here. See that bottom row of really sharp teeth? I don't want to go dark right next to it. But on the top of the mouth, you better believe I am. And it's going to fade off right into that. Now, here's the cool thing. I have some teeth right here, right there, that are showing up pretty well. I could go in between and kind of fade off that darkness so that you can still see the individual teeth popping out. But I have to make sure that that darkness right there doesn't just abruptly end. Okay. You know what? This is the moment. This is the moment where I have to make a crucial decision as a creature designer. I want everybody to pay attention. So the inside of that mouth right here, you can tell the top and you can tell the bottom. If I put anything else down, it's going to be too much. It's going to be too much. We can still see teeth. They don't have to all be shiny white, pearly white teeth, but we can see where they are. I want to so badly to go back in there and add saliva and add, like, who knows what else inside of the mouth hole. I'm not going to. I'm going to call that done. Maybe go on the outside. Just kind of separate the pincer from that little mandible. Okay. It pains me to say it, folks, but sometimes when you're evaluating your drawings, you want to go forward so badly, but if you do, you're overworking it, and it's not going to turn out good. So we're going to call this one done. Okay. Now, is this a finished illustration? It could be. Like, it could be finished for presentation's sake, but not for the modeling department. No, if I were to do this for games or something, I would do side view, I would do top view, wouldn't really need to do a rear view. I would do a close-up shot of one of the mandibles, mouth open, mouth closed, attacking, special abilities and stuff. But that's for like a whole sheet. We're not going to do that. I think we're showing off enough here to where we can clearly see it's a big beast, and we don't really need to see anything else. But one thing that I could put down here, why don't we draw ourselves a little human just to show us how big this thing is? Maybe he's got like a sword on the back and he's like, whoa, mother, what is that thing? He's got armor on, and maybe he's like holding a dagger, and he's ready to fight that thing. Put some a little hood on. Kind of looks like a ninja. All right. He's got his battle stance ready, and he doesn't know what's going on, man, but he's ready. He's ready. Okay, he's getting his weapons ready. Got his little pouches on the side. Got his armor. Yeah, he's ready to roll. That's how big it is compared to a human. It's pretty big. All right. So let's recap what we talked about today. Confusing or weak silhouette, anatomy that doesn't support the design, shading that flattens the form, and texture applied without purpose. So we made sure that the silhouette was simple and readable. We made sure that all of the claws, the pincer, and the fins and everything, we gave it purpose. And then shading the flatten or making sure that the shading does not flatten the form. So, we talked about the coarse shadow right here, and we talked about inside of the mouth and rolling parts, fat deposits and skin and everything. And then texture applied without purpose. So you want to avoid that. So any of the skin wrinkles that I have, or because the body is, bending at that spot, we gave tiny little spikes and protectors in here. And there we have it. So thanks again, everybody. You're awesome. Hopefully you enjoyed this lesson. Peace. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we are talking about some more of the biggest beginner mistakes that young creature designers make. So we got a page here, and you're going to see how I built this and the mistakes that I walk you guys through. And then we'll be doing a fun little sketch towards the end. I'm going to show you problems with weight distribution, bending the leg wrong, the obsession with symmetry, and so much more. So grab your pencils, sharpen them, make sure you're fed, stay hydrated, and let's jump into it. All right, everyone, to kick things off with the biggest list of anatomy mistakes for beginner artists, we're going to talk about floating muscles with no bony landmarks. So you see here on the page, I have two arms. One, it's rather wonky. There's a lot of bumps and lumps, and it looks kind of gross. And then over here is a slightly more normal human arm. Not super muscular, not super ripped or defined, but I'm going to show you what happens when we have floating muscles. All right, problem number one, a bunch of bumps. There's no insertion point, okay? The muscles are not wrapping around the form, and there's no bony landmarks. So what happens is if we don't know where the muscles go, we just kind of put in bumps everywhere. If it's a large shoulder region and we don't exactly know where the deltoid muscles go and the striations and stuff, we'll just start kind of put bumps there and hope for the best. And it just looks like it was attacked by a bunch of hornets, and there's, a lot of swelling going on. You want to avoid that. And then over here, you'll see the outline to a more normalized human arm. And the problem that we see is we'll just get really thick outlines of where we think muscles should be, like this. So for example, if you don't study human anatomy and you don't study animal anatomy, you know that there are deltoid muscles and biceps and forearms. We compartmentalize those areas in our brains as lumps of muscle, a grouping. We know the grouping is there, we just don't know what the grouping is actually doing. So we'll do this weird outside of the bicep, and then we'll just kind of put symmetry on it, and we'll do the opposite on that side, and it's a very dark outline in the middle of the arm. Same thing with shoulders. We'll just kind of put these really dark bumps in there. Oh, we want a tricep? We'll just do the opposite, and we'll do like a little outline, and all of a sudden it'll be the exact same as the bicep. And then of course for the forearm, we'll put one or two really long distinct lines. They'll end abruptly, and there's no continuation of where the muscles are going, where they're growing into, etc. So in order to avoid that, we need to start thinking about what the muscles are doing underneath the skin, underneath the fat, underneath the tissue, and veins and organs even. All right, now I'm using a human arm as a reference, but the same principles apply to animal arms, and especially if you're doing something humanoid or totally alien in creature, or totally alien when you're designing creatures. All right, so let's say that you have a creature arm. Okay, let's do it over here. Kind of use this space up a little bit. Now, for the outline, like let's say you want to get that form in there first. You should always worry about getting the form in before you commit to any details. It's really good to lightly place in areas of articulation, ovals for shoulders, circles or ovals for elbows, and of course down here at the wrist. Okay, now when we have our light lines going across here, go on this wonderful thing called Google. Type in animal anatomy. Type in the animal that you want to study. The great thing is, let's say that you're studying quadrupeds. There's a lot of different types of quadrupeds out there. We have unguligrades, which are hoofed animals. We have plantigrades, so you can look at bears. And you can also look at lizards or rodents. Okay, you got gerbils, squirrels, ferrets, all of those types of animals. And you can start looking at the different muscle anatomy pics online. And this is just to start out too. Okay, you don't have to be a veterinarian to know all this stuff. You don't have to study anatomy religiously. But what you do have to do is think lightly, build up these shapes in here, and then you start to put the muscles in and knowing where they attach. Because once you start to indicate with light lines of where the muscle striations are, not committing to any details, you're going to start to see structure really happening. Long head of the tricep flowing down and attaching to the elbows. There we go. This is a really good way to start. As you can see the big difference between this one, and that one. With muscles, especially the deltoid region, you want those muscles to show up. You got to be subtle with these too, because not all the creatures that you're designing are going to be ripped. They're not going to look like Jay Cutler, okay? As a matter of fact, most animals in the animal kingdom are not ripped. They have a layer of fat on them. Just look at rhinos, just look at hippos. I mean, they're almost 100% muscle, and yet you can't tell. All right, just remember that. The bony landmarks really, really help. Okay, so let's say that you have a really alien looking arm. Okay, something strange. Okay, it's bending, it's kind of insectoid, got this really crazy looking bend right here. Okay, there's the elbow in the back. Now, bony landmark would be the wrist, where the carpals, the carpal bones up here, and then you have your metacarpals as they stretch out and then get to the phalange, or the dew claw. Put that in the front because this is a forelimb. Forelimbs are in front, hind limbs are in back. We'll go over those too later in the video, probably as a bonus, because it originally wasn't in the list, but I'm thinking we need to do that. Okay, and then of course back here, look at this big bump coming out. This is a huge bony landmark. Okay, that's what could be considered the pisiform. Okay, now pisiforms are on dogs. Okay, and we'll go over that too. But the pisiforms here. Okay, we don't really need to show exactly what's going on underneath that, but we do know that all of the large forearm muscles out here don't need to be defined by each striation, just the big ones. That's it. That's all, folks. You got your bump here for the brachialis muscle, and then that's it. Now, right away, this looks way more realistic than drawing gigantic dark lines indicating where biceps and triceps and deltoid muscles should go. The next thing I'm going to talk about is a controversial one, because there are exceptions to this particular section, and one that I'm partial to because I've done this and I still do it frequently, and that is human proportions sneaking into non-human creatures. Now, what I mean by that is, if you have no intention of making a humanoid to begin with, and you're sticking straight to a cat, a gazelle, or a gazelle-like creature like a moose, something where you need to study those types of species to get that anatomy in, but you sneak in human anatomy. Unless you're going the creepy route or the slightly morphed route, it's not going to bode well for you, because what's going to happen is it's just going to end up looking like somebody wearing a suit, and we want these to feel as natural as possible. So right here, we just have a section for a horse deltoid region. Okay, so this is the deltoid. Okay, you got your neck here, and then you got the torso coming off. This is the lat, obliques. This is where the arm would start. So right up in here in that shoulder region, this happens a lot. Now, whenever I do creepy aliens or, something that is not from this world, I like to put in human anatomy mainly because it gives a sense of something is off, but in a good way, almost like a disturbing way. But if it's accident because you don't know what's there, it's just a matter of studying it. So for example, like let's say that I do a quadruped with human-like shoulders. All right, but I'm going to stretch it out and I'm going to make it look a little weird. All right, so it's tall, it's lanky. You can still see the human influence. Okay, we got our deltoid here, going down and splitting between the bicep. Okay, we got the long head of the tricep in the back. So it's almost like a very emaciated, gangly alien shape. Okay, and you got your rhomboid, your scapula everywhere in the back. But something is off with that arm. Okay, that is the exception. So if you're going to go with that, that's fine. Because what I could do is I could do the long neck, and I can do the chest, and it's pretty successful. Great. But if we're going straight horse design, something from mythology, if we're doing something that a client asks and it needs to be more along the lines of this, you can't sneak in human anatomy. And I wouldn't say that this is a huge problem that we see among beginners, but it kind of is a bad habit to get into if you only do the morphing. It's great that if you want to do something scary to put in the human anatomy just to make us kind of go, ooh, that's creepy, but in a good way. Things about Silent Hill, and other creatures like that. Okay, so just to kind of give a list on body parts that do sneak in when you don't mean it to, we got the human rib cage, human shoulder width, human pelvis. The neck length is a very big one, and human facial spacing. That is massive. Okay, so let's say that we take this four-legged quadruped here, but instead of the chest coming out, we just do a human neck, and then we do the head. Okay, so we got like a head coming off here, but we don't mean to. That's the thing. We can't draw the anatomy like this and then have somebody point out, that doesn't look like a horse head, and then you say, well, I meant to be like that. No, most of the time you didn't. You just didn't know what to do. So study horse heads, study cat heads, caribou, wildebeest, hyena, lions, as many species as you can. That way you can differentiate neck length. I mean, nobody's going to put a human head on the end of a giraffe, although that would look kind of awesome. Not going to lie. Comment below and please do that, and then share it to our Discord. That would be kind of hilarious. Okay, so be very careful about human-like proportions. Another place that I definitely see it in, and this is really difficult not to do, and that is in the hind legs. Okay, hind legs are big. When you look at bears and plantigrades, animals like that, they have very similar legs to us. However, you don't just want to put a kneecap and then the calf and the shin and the ankle coming down like a dude, just like a person. It looks super goofy, like somebody in a suit, and we don't want to do that. And to couple that off, then you get this. So then you're just putting in thigh lumps because you think that should be there, and then it in bubbly shapes. Okay, because we don't know enough about subtleties of anatomy down there, and you can kind of see the train wreck that's about to happen. Again, all of these that I'm listing, it doesn't mean you're a bad artist. Okay, it doesn't mean that you're going to be terrible. It just means let's catch this stuff early. so that you don't do it for the next 15 to 20 years and you're wondering why your stuff still looks off. Okay, let's correct that stuff. All right, the next thing that we see as mentors and as teachers are heads that don't match the body. All right, so I'm going to go over what this is here, but I need to explain this part because this is a huge problem among beginners. The skull, too large for the neck. So this is a big head and a small neck. The jaw hinge is in the wrong place, so it's so squeezed back here that there's actually no muscle whatsoever that can actually help the jaw hinge back and forth. Eyes are too human. There's no cranial mass to the back of the head, especially where it connects. And I'll do a side view too. And if you're going to put a horn on it, there's no structural support. There's just a horn placed there. Okay, man, because let's face it, like what ends up happening is, it just looks like that neighbor that smokes everything. Okay, like every neighborhood has that person. So a way to correct that, just to show you from side view, if ever you have a body, like let's say you have the leg coming down like this, hunchback, kind of like a bullish creature, and then you have a neck coming out. Now this is a huge problem. I go over this in my mentorships all the time. The neck muscles need to look strong enough in order to house the head on the neck or at the end of the neck. You can't have the super skinny neck and then a large head. It doesn't work like that. Now, are there exceptions? Yes, but you can't rely on those exceptions. Okay, there's a reason why the neck of a rhinoceros and the neck of a buffalo are as big as they are, because both of those animals have horns. The heads are massive, and it's basically how they evolved. Okay, so you do a thicker neck, and you have to make sure that the cranial mass matches that. Okay, you don't want to go like too much of a dip within the back of the neck and then have the head bump up, because then there's no trapezius muscle from the back connecting the back of the head. It just looks really weak back there, kind of like a baby. There's a reason why babies can't hold their heads up like adults can. It's because the neck muscles have not developed yet. So you don't want your creature to have that problem. Okay, you want to make sure that the heads aren't too massive, and you want to make sure that the thickness bleeds in nicely to the neck. All right, now the other thing is for the eyes. Beginner artists tend to be really obsessed about eyeballs. I was one of them, man. Like when I was younger and I started drawing, I just wanted to draw eyes. I don't know why. I would fill up a whole sketch page with nothing but eyes. There's something magical about the eye, and there's something beautiful about it, especially if you like to color them. But you have to think about the creature that you're designing. Okay, if you really look at what this is, it's more of like a dinosaur, right? Like a dragon, dinosaur, meat-eating type of creature. When you have these human-looking eyes in there, it tends to take away the mood that you're trying to get with it. It's either too cute, too goofy, or too unbalanced. And the problem with the horns having no structural support, you have to, well, you don't have to, but it's good to draw the horns coming out of a place where it looks like the skin is growing with the base of it, and then the horn comes out. Make sure that the horns look like there's evolution to them. They evolved from a bigger mass. Doesn't matter how big the horns are either. If I wanted to make a horn come out of this jaw, I would at least try to thicken up the base and then have the horn come out of that spot so that it looks like the horn bone is growing from the jaw muscle, the jawbone. Okay, and you want it to come out so it looks naturally attached to it. He looks so goofy. I don't even know what that is anymore. Oh boy, what's happening here? I don't know what's happening. Hopefully you guys are taking this in and knowing that I'm just having fun with this. Again, I want to reiterate that if you're doing all of these mistakes, they're not really mistakes. It's just baby steps. It's a stepping stone, okay? We all have to go through this at some point, whether it's goofy outlined muscles that are too dark, putting lumps in here, kind of looks like 100 pounds of chewed bubble gum, really. Like, you got to be careful with that. And then, of course, sneaking human proportions in. And we're going to be getting into more of it, too. I'm actually running out of space here on this page. So hopefully that helped. And when you're doing the jaw hinges, best way to study that and to get better at jaw hinges, draw the skulls of common animals, like large cats, lizards, things of that nature, okay? Next on the list, incorrect weight distribution. So while we draw this little ground plane in here, I'll show you and tell you the 4 main problems within this. One of them, legs too thin to support the mass. Feet are too small. Center of gravity too far forward or backward. And then there's no sense of load-bearing structure. So let's get into those. Okay, let's start talking about the legs too thin to support the mass. Now, sometimes we can draw a large creature, this very big body. Okay, let's just get something loose in here. It's kind of a manatee shape. All right, and then let's say that it does have a hip in the back and hip in the front. There's a neck there, would appear to be a neck. And then you have legs that are too thin to support the mass. I think this is pretty straightforward. The legs are too skinny. They're too skinny. Okay, and you have these really weird short legs like this, and it doesn't look like they'll hold up anything. And then what happens is the feet are too small. So you got these really tiny feet on legs that are already too tiny. Now we're really starting to compound the problems. And then third, the center of gravity is way too far forward. So this happens a lot. Here's the body. There's a long head. So let's just say that's the head. Something crazy. Let's fit it on this page here, okay? We got our ear right here. Okay, we got the eye. So all this is just a basic outline of kind of like an anteater-like head. Okay, here's the problem. The center of gravity is way off. Look at all of this empty real estate in here. We have this huge mass of a body overhanging. And what's going to happen is that weight is going to pour over into nothing supporting it. So the legs themselves are not far forward enough. And I think studying more about the center of gravity and what that means, load-bearing structure, studying center of gravity and what load-bearing structures are for animals, I think that's really going to help. And, here's another problem. I'm just going to get into this real quick too. The front limbs bend forward like knees. Yep, because there's a difference between forelimbs and hind limbs. There's a difference between ankles and non-ankles. Okay, so when it comes to quadrupeds, you definitely don't want to see front bending legs like this. Are there exceptions? Yes, folks, there's always an exception, but you cannot rely on the exceptions. So why am I explaining all this? Well, you don't want your creatures looking like they're going to instantly collapse. That can't happen. So how would I change this? So let's look up here. I would put the legs right up front. Could you do 6-legged animal? Yes, you could. You very well could. Just look at Avatar. But since we're not doing that, and this would just be a mistake, you can't just always plop, an extra set of legs in there, because it's not always going to work. Tiny feet, man. Just look at Jurassic Park, the very first one. Okay, and what they did so beautifully were the suits of the velociraptors. People had to wear those, but they made the feet in such a way to where, like, they were thick enough and look like they can hold and support the weight of those velociraptors. Same thing with the werewolves in Underworld. I love the Underworld movies. Very, very good movies. And I love the sequels, all of it. And they did a great job at showing thick ankles and bigger feet so that they can walk on it. Okay, so hopefully this helps. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is the symmetry addiction. So what is that? It's when beginners default to perfect symmetry because it feels safe. And we've all done this before, but I want to show you exactly what happens. Students will mirror limbs, they'll mirror horns, patterns, silhouette, everything. All right. And let's say you actually start decent on perspective. Okay. So let's say we get some horns here, and then, we have like a face coming down in between the horns, and we'll do another set of horns, and then we'll try to get that perspective in there. Another set. Okay. So far, so good, right? And then all of a sudden we want to change up the head, and we'll put 2 little smaller spikes right there. But then we start freaking out because we want to make sure that those horns are mirrored right here. So what do? We put the exact same horns, the exact same slope, and then you can start to see what's happening. This doesn't just happen with horns, but since we're doing it for the face, might as well. We'll do the head up here, round the head off, and then all of a sudden, we'll put an eyeball in there that looks too human. Well, human-like eye, but like an eyelid. Okay. Now, this is an okay eye, actually. It's more of the creepy factor than anything else. But let's say you put, like your pupil in there, eyelashes in, and now it looks like a female eye with mascara on. So what do? We go over here, and we want to try to put the eye in. But here's where things start to screw up. We don't really know the tilt of that eye on the other side. So we pull the side of the face way up so that we can stretch the eye and make it look like it belongs there. That's not what happens, but it's also not the problem we're talking about. We're trying to be so symmetrical and identical that whatever we see on this side has to be seen over there. And in reality, we wouldn't even see that eye. And this is when you would have to use the eraser. Okay, so you have to erase that eyeball right there. Because technically, you got this huge area right here for the eyebrow. That's what you would see. But if you put the eyebrow in, and there's a bump right there, you're going to put the bump right there. Every single thing is symmetrical. What happens is, when all is said and done, symmetry makes creatures look artificial and boring. But there's also a time and place to have awesome symmetry. So I don't want you guys listening to this and then looking at your creatures and going, well, I've been practicing symmetry for months now, and I felt like I've made progress. Yes, it's amazing. Please continue with symmetry. You have to know it, especially those of you sketching for, completing projects, and then you have to send that off to a 3D department. You have to do your own orthographic views, front, side, top, back, belly, etc. So yes, you have to make sure that the symmetry is good. But let's change some things up to give the creature more character. Okay, so let's say that you did something so symmetrical, it's going to be even everywhere. Let's draw the same creature over here. Let's put a horn in, like this. However, the big horn on this side, let's say that it's kind of broken. Okay, let's say it broke off in battle. Okay, next you have these strange, almost like warthog spikes or something coming off here. So what if you brought those up? So let's say the spike is coming here, like that, but you have a separate one right there. It kind of breaks the symmetry. However, you only have one over here, and it's a little thicker at the base. And instead of making it cookie cutter where the outline of the horn stops, the outline of the horn stops here, and there's no real connection point, and the same thing happens there. Why not build some structure up in between that section? Because what you could do is you could put, well, since I have a second horn there, move this up so you can see it, I can put maybe smaller bumps on the outside of this one. This one gets another one. And now all of a sudden, the creature has some character, doesn't it? It's almost like this thing evolved, and it evolved efficiently for battle. However, nothing's perfect. Just like humans. We evolved, but nothing is perfect. For example, our tailbones. We used to have tails, and we slowly started to evolve, and now we don't have tails anymore. Think about other animals that have things weird about them. I mean, German shepherds with hip dysplasia. It's like evolution just kind of played a trick on it, didn't it? Just that species. Pugs and their faces and their nasal cavities. Okay, humans and appendix. Like, why do we have something in there that just bursts? It's crazy. Evolution's not done yet. But anyway, we start putting all of these imperfections in the skin, and now we really have something. So let's say we can add some to the front of the face here. Now, what do we have to do here? We have to put the eyeball in, right? Well, look at this. Look how cool this could look. Instead of just 1, 2, similar to a triceratops, what if we put the indication that there's one sticking out here, but the one over here is curved this way? See how it's curved that way? Now all of a sudden you have a really interesting head. And what would make it even crazier if you just take out the eyes. Just take them out. Okay, and just start making the horns instead in the same spot. Bend the skin around. Now we're really talking. Now we're talking about something interesting, yet symmetry is still there. The groupings of different horns and, even the nasal or the nose opening right here, you can put a bump in on top of the nose and still show it right there. Lightly sketch in your center line, and you're going to have something much more interesting. Okay, now we're going to enter part 2 of our video, and I'm going to stop telling all of you what you're doing horribly wrong, and you'll never want to draw creatures again. We're going to have some fun, and we're going to draw our own creature with all of these tips in mind. Making sure that there's no random lumps for muscles, strange outline for muscles, human-looking eyes that are, 2 human-looking eyes, making sure that the head isn't too large for the neck, and we're going to make sure that our creature's going to have bony landmarks. There's a clear difference between human anatomy and animal anatomy, and I'll tell you when it's okay to get into the humanoid aspect and sneak in some human anatomy. Okay, so how are we going to start this? First, I want you to sharpen your pencils. Okay, take a break, pause this video, get a drink, come back, and I'll show you what I'm using first before we all do that. I'm using the Staedtler Mars Lumograph 4B pencil, which is really good. Speaking of pencils, I've been asked lately, more so than ever before, is it okay to sketch with a mechanical pencil? And the answer is yes. You can sketch with a mechanical pencil. There is a downside to sketching with mechanical pencils, and I don't think a lot of artists realize this, and that is it's really hard to get thick to thin lines with mechanical pencils. Some of the brands you actually can, some of the brands have actually gotten quite good, but for the most part, it's probably better just to use good old-fashioned wood and graphite. And then keep mechanical pencils for details, because mechanical pencils are beautiful for our details. Anyway, how are we going to start this? I'm just going to do an oval. You can draw an oval along with me, or you could do something completely different if you want to do something aquatic, snake-like. You can choose that. Now, do I have an animal in mind before I start doing all of this? The answer is no. I'm just doing a basic shape. Cubes, cones, cylinder, sphere, slightly altering each one of those. My creature is going to fall within the realm of one of those shapes. Okay. Now, as I slowly start to put in these very light lines kind of erupting from the shape, I don't have a leg in mind. I don't have a face, a tail, scales, any of that. Instead, I'm allowing my pencil to show me what's going on. I'm not worrying about perfection. I'm not worrying about a specific species of animal that I have to copy off of a photo. No, I don't care. What I care about is just getting in the form, because in my last video, one of my last videos, I was showing the importance of establishing the form before details, before shading, any of that. I want to be sure that I'm drawing through the object. Now this is very light, and the way I'm holding this is lightly with my pinky and the side of my palm guiding my lines back and forth. And I would say that more time should be spent on the construction of your creatures versus noodling in details and shading and all of that. Because if you structure the creatures right, the shading and details are much, much easier to achieve because you're not guessing on the surface of what those values and what those details have to be placed on. You already know the structure. So as I start to place these lines in, I'm kind of getting a neat indication of something I could be drawing. I know that the body itself is very light, and I know that the arms are coming out this way. It just feels correct. And here, right here in the middle, is probably going to be where the head is growing. Now, how long the head is, if it has spikes, I'm not sure yet. But the center line is pretty much established now. Another thing that I want to point out is when you're at this stage and everything is extremely light and you don't know what you're drawing yet, if you have trouble extracting the shapes from that light sketch, just know that the larger shapes that you see, you don't have to be an artist to see them. Just look and see what's happening. There's a big open area right here. So this could, just use your imagination. This could easily be a big shape coming out. The first shape that we started with, the jelly bean shape, that to me, and common sense wise, it should be just the body. Okay, and it's easier to build a body off of that. This shape in the back, I'm just gonna make it the tail. Mainly because this is the edge of my paper. Could I make it go up here? Probably. As a matter of fact, I'll be totally honest with you guys, I don't like connecting pages in my sketchbook. I like to keep the pages separate. I know a lot of people will just use a smaller sketchbook and they'll make one giant drawing and it'll go over the seam and then it'll go to the other side. Great, like keep doing it. I personally don't like it. I hate trying to get shading in right in here. Just to me, it ruins the flow of what I'm trying to do and I just end up getting frustrated. I know a lot of graffiti artists like to do it and concept artists for dragon design, because the bodies are long. So, and you're also at the mercy of the sketchbook that you have. Maybe you don't have a big one. Okay, it's not like A2, A3, like who knows what it is. Okay, I'm starting to get a sense of what's happening here. I'm not liking that tail now. I'm not liking it. But what I am liking is this front shape. Look at all these lines doubling up on each other. I'm going to keep that. I'm going to keep it. And I see a line right there. And I think I'm going to keep that as probably a mandible. Some kind of hook. So it's not going to be straight up insect, but it's going to have skin over insect-like joints. And I gave a lesson on that in a video not too long ago too. So I'm going to treat this limb like what we were talking about before with the horns coming out, with the base, making sure that it's kind of splayed outwards a little bit so it looks like it's growing from the surface. Same thing with this creature here. Now, and a little bonus problem is attaching limbs on top of the creatures versus having the limbs growing from them. It's the whole evolution versus cookie cutter effect. Okay, the bump right here, right there, is the deltoid muscle, or I guess what's equivalent to the bigger muscles allowing the mandible to move. It's moving out and then it stops. So this area is where it attaches to the larger frame of the body. Here's where something that you can do about asymmetry, it's going to make it really intriguing. These perspective lines that I ran across this critter, you don't have to follow them to the T on the other side. Okay? This strange mandible coming out, the point up here where it bends, I'm going to do a perspective line, yes. But instead, I'm going to lift it. I'm going to make that one a little closer. Almost like the creature's kind of cleaning itself, or trying to. Just that little bit of asymmetry goes a long way into showing movement. You guys want good practice? Look at a face hugger. Just try to draw a face hugger from the Alien movies. It's the culmination of every type of creature that you can think of. It's got a long tail. It's like an insect. It's like a mammal. It's slimy like an amphibian. Kind of looks like a lizard. Kind of looks like a crab. Like there's so many things happening. It just doesn't have hair or wings, but that would be terrifying if it had wings. But anyway, just look at all the different movements that those little fingers are doing on that creature, especially the tail. Okay, I keep brushing over the center line. I like to get a feel for what I'm doing here. And since this shape happening now, as I'm coming full circle under here, this is where it is on the underbelly. So maybe a tail is attached. We just can't see it because we don't have X-ray vision. So we don't know what's going on back there. But let's continue. Down here on the bottom of this rounded shape, I'm going to keep it simple and just make it rounded. I'm not going to make random spikes, scales, or anything until I have a purpose for what I'm doing. Okay? Is this thing needing to be armored? Is it the apex predator, or is this thing eaten quite often by a much larger creature? I don't know yet. What I do know, if this thing's going to have a leg, it's going to have to be separate from this massive, I guess, muscle cluster of that mandible right there. So I'm going to keep the shoulder here. Now, here's where I can do one of two things. And if you guys are following along with me, you'll understand. Do I put a human deltoid muscle in there, a human shoulder, or not? That is the key. So let's see if we can kind of change things up a little bit. I'm going to make just one funnel shape. That's it. It's growing outward because it's attaching to this larger area. I need to be careful that there's no pinching point inside here. That could very easily happen. I could give the excuse that it's a creature from another world, and so what, it's my alien. Yes, but guess what? Your so what alien has to be animated, and it has to be sculpted. I'm trying to view this from a serious point of view, a serious video game production pipeline / visual effects pipeline, okay? I have to make sure that that works. Now, I could make this an insect leg, but that would kind of defeat the purpose of what's going on here. I've already established that it is rather mammalian. There's going to be skin. So I'm going to do it here, and I'm just going to make the joint and the leg coming down. It's kind of like a large cylindrical shape. No details are committed yet. We don't want to do that. We are establishing the form. So I'll put my oval in there to symbolize where the joint is. And I can even do something like a wireframe. Okay, if there's going to be a wireframe running through the center of the limb, so I know where the joint is taking place, I'm going to do that. There we go. So what that does is, as I'm drawing through the object, I'm able to see what's happening. Now, as I'm working down this limb, look at the creatures that you guys are drawing right now. Maybe it's not insect-like, maybe it's more of a mammal, maybe it's aquatic, but just make sure that there is motion in the limbs. All right, now, the stance that this creature will eventually be standing in is very wide. It's trying to grip the ground. What I can do here, I'm going to add in an extra set of limbs underneath, and they're going to bend upward. Now, this isn't a random thing to add just because I think it looks cool. I mean, yes, I want it to look cool, but it's more of a ground grabber. There's nothing on the ground so far or down by its belly that would allow it to grab food from down there. So I think it would be terrifying if it had an extra set of mandibles on the bottom. Now, what am I going to do when I do a new limb like this? I'm going to go to the very tip, and I'm going to do perspective lines to honor where all the other ones are going. They're converging up here to the left. So, naturally, in our obsession with symmetry, we want to do the exact same thing. We want the tip to fall on that line over there. Yes, you could do that. Or, why not have fun with it? Let's figure out what it can do. Maybe this limb on that side is actually turned in a little bit. Wouldn't that be crazy? See this here? That's a joint, and this is a joint. They hinge very close together. If I do a perspective line, I know where that hinge is going to be taking place. So let's stretch some limbs out, and then maybe it's kind of coming up here, or maybe it's pinching this one. Now this thing is definitely in motion. And if you get confused about what's happening, just draw through the object. There's a lot of things happening right now. I know that this one is going to be happening in the front. Pretty confident about that particular limb, so I don't need to worry about the lightness and darkness of it. Over here on the other side is the second one. So there's the joint right there. Same thing with that one. And then this scooper is over here, but it's scooping upward like that. So, you know what would be cool? What if we just draw a victim in there? Some kind of worm-like creature freaked out that it got caught. Twist it around. Have the tail coming up here. This thing is angry. It has no idea what's happening. And maybe we'll make it like a salamander. Put like little limbs on the side, like a little head. It's like, no. Multiple arms. Poor thing. Maybe put some eyes on the side right here. Got itself a food source. There we go. What would you name this big creature? It's always fun. I haven't asked you guys to name these creatures in a while. So how would we continue this? Well, we still have to account for the leg on the other side. Okay, so maybe as this creature, the one we're drawing now, maybe it had to position itself in an awkward way or a way where it had to move quickly in order to catch this. So if the knee is right here in perspective, going across there. By this time, if you guys are doing something in front 3/4, which is front 3QTR, anytime you see that, it's the front 3/4. If you see anything in front 3/4 view, you can fall into the symmetry trap or you can try to change it around. But here's the knee, like this. We're going to see the back of the knee. And then maybe we can make it reach forward like this. So it's out. Maybe it had to turn a weird way. But we're not focusing on the details for that part yet. Okay, now we got something creepy. So I'm just going to put in shadow this side of the creature so we can see what's going on. And then I'm going to darken just the belly. Short control burst, thick to thin. There's the equivalent of an armpit. Okay, there we go. Yeah, we could definitely shade under here. Just lightly put in some values. That looks pretty cool. Wasn't really sure how this was going to turn out, but it's not bad. Now the meeting of these two big limbs, I'm going to call this thing a limb. It's going to be interesting right in here, especially for the deltoid muscle. So I'm just going to roll that up, and that could be a scapula. It is like a big mammal, huh? So strange. And let's put our little friend here, the little food source. He's going to be, or it's going to be, shaded in, just to show where it is. And then I'm just going to darken the actual mandible part. Yeah, there we go. And of course we got this one too, the leg. There's going to be a spot or spots where the least amount of light is touching, and you're going to have really dark cast shadows, and that's okay. Okay, there we go. Now we can really start to see it. Man, it's pretty creepy, huh? Have these little serrated edges. This whole extra limb down there would be in shadow, but I'm not going to focus on that area just because it's not as important as the two in the front. And I think what I want to do is just give a small circular eye, just jet black merciless eye. And then I'm going to go in perspective over here, and I'm just going to indicate where it is. Just a little slit. because the head itself is rounded, so you won't see as much of that mouth in there. Okay, and then I think what I'll do is hint at a mouth with some really sharp teeth coming out, but I'm not going to show you in all of its detail what actually is happening in that area. I'm just going to let you guys interpret it. That's a pretty freaky looking mouth. And I can get pretty creepy with this eye too, especially if I want to go zombie-like. I'm just going to indicate where some of the skin might be bending up near the eye socket. Yeah, so much fun. Okay, so some of the things that I can do now is put in some values right on that main arm. And I don't want to put in random lumps. Remember what I was talking about earlier, which is one of the problems that beginners have. You can invent muscle, but there's something that you need to think about when you invent it. It's the muscle tissue still needs to flex. The tendons, ligaments, carpals, metatarsals, all of that stuff, all of the things that make animals and humans move and contort and all that stuff, it still needs to exist in a believable fashion for a creature. So if I wanted to make a mandible here, it probably needs larger muscles near the base of it that attach to the creature. Okay? What I mean by that is you don't want it to make it look like you're just placing it on top of it. Okay, you want to make sure that it looks like it's growing from it. Random spikes. I could put random spikes over here, but I think I'm going to do something that we see in nature, especially on like insects and even bearded dragons, lizards. I mean, we see it on iguanas all the time. I'm going to start putting a row of spikes running down the spine. This is a pretty big vulnerable spot for the creature to be bitten. So we want to be able to protect the largest spot that's open. And the same thing could be said near the eye. So what if we put some spikes in the eye? And this thing really helps protect it. There we go. Put some shadows in there. Outline it. Okay, and as we go, I can probably do another eye right here. Maybe that is the eyeball used for more concentration than anything. The back one could be for peripherals, seeing over here. And then, of course, you got the smaller one that can focus directly on the food source. I mean, imagine already being eaten by this thing, but you have a separate set of eyes that solely attaches to you and lets the other one do whatever, lets the other set do whatever they want. It's crazy. So we're going to make sure the muscles attach to the limb. And then skin has wrinkles at the joints, which is another believability factor that beginner artists tend to ignore. Put those wrinkles in there because we got to know even what direction that the arm can bend. I like putting in slight fuzzy shading at the base of any of the spikes. And of course, those will move larger as they get near the hunch. Okay, we'll keep going down like that. Now the back of the cranium here, it's a thick neck on purpose because it needs to stay hidden. And we're going to keep it like that. All right. Now, this is how I would build up a creature from absolute scratch. But, you know, the gist of today's lesson are the things that we talked about when it comes to lumpy muscles placed incorrectly, horns, neck anatomy, too large of head, weight distribution, human proportions. Okay. Matter of fact, I didn't put any human proportions in this, but I gave myself permission to. It just didn't make any sense for it to have it. Okay? I hope that you guys loved this today. This was so much fun to do, and I look forward to the comments and just to see if anything really helped you. Thanks again.